Alright, YouTube, it's time to discuss my feelings of nuclear power, because people keep assuming that I'm a complete alarmist about the existence of nuke plants or something like that. I'm actually not. What I am is sensible enough to understand that there are problems with nuclear energy, which is something that both some hardcore environmentalists and a lot of people that are like pro-business conservatism forever don't really get. What I am saying is that when you criticize, for instance, solar power, which has made leaps and bounds in efficiency, it's far better than it was a decade or certainly several decades ago. When you criticize solar power by saying, oh, well, you have to mine all these minerals to make the panels, and so it's not really clean, you're still ripping apart hillsides in search for the minerals involved, and that uses heavy machinery that uses oil. The same is true of uranium mining. The same when they're digging out these ores to process into nuclear fuel, you don't think they're using the same heavy machinery and the same strip mining techniques that they're using to obtain all of the other materials necessary for solar power or the metals needed for windmills? Of course they are. It's the same style of machinery. Now, one thing that's been said, Varg pointed this out, was, oh, well, you can't make solar panels without fossil fuel. You're actually wrong there. You can use solar panels to power the machines necessary to make additional solar power. Is it as efficient in terms of cost? No. Currently, it would be quite expensive. As its efficiency rises, that won't be so much of a problem. And because the energy source that you're making does not require the same constant extraction, sort of one-use system of a fossil fuel, it can be made actually more efficient long-term. That machinery could be powered by electricity that's literally generated by panels you've already made, by wind power, hydroelectric, which I'm not a huge fan of. It kind of fucks up the landscape, so to speak, and then every once in a while a dam collapses. You see, we have various problems. My point, though, is this. With nuclear power, I support its use, but I don't support its use perpetually, because it is still exhaustible in terms of resources, especially easily obtained resources. It is not fully clean. And then every once in a while, whether you want to admit it or not, you do have a Chernobyl or a Fukushima, the effects of which last far longer than any disaster you can imagine with even the dirtier fossil fuels. Unless you count, oh, the coal seam caught fire, and now this entire county is totally destabilizing, and fumaroles are popping up everywhere or something like that. Yeah, that's a problem. There's a reason why I'm not big on coal either. Oil is fine. It's presumably exhaustible, although we've vastly expanded our capability to obtain it. We're not anywhere near peak oil at this point because we developed fracking, which, again, comes with its own problems. We've got quite a bit of natural gas. There is always hydroelectric, and then there are these other energy resources that we can use. As far as nuclear goes, though, I would say nuclear plants are safer than they were in the past. But in a shit-hits-the-fan scenario, what I'm looking forward to is the next Carrington event, the next large-scale strike by an asteroid, the next truly devastating, 9.5 earthquake that will eventually happen in the next century or so. And depending on where that occurs and to what extent it occurs, it could entirely melt down all of the old-style plants very quickly, and leave in its wake so much instability that even the newer style plants begin to get fucked. It doesn't matter if the storage technique for the fuel rods is more safe than it was in the past if you anticipate spending years and years with zero maintenance, because simply nobody will be coming to work because society will have been largely upended. The added effect of that much radioactive release from that many nuclear plants, some of which are in nations that are by no means anywhere near as technologically literate as the US or Japan. And we're looking at these states that are literate in this sense, and they still have these disasters. You got Fukushima, and then we got like 3 Mile Island, which was a partial shit-hits-the-fan moment there. When we look at that, can we really be sure that it's a good idea to have so many nuclear plants in the world? It's like the idea of nuclear war. I've already said this. If you have a nuclear war, a lot of that radioactivity is no longer a problem. Within a few years, a lot of it has died down back to background. We look at ground zero of Project Trinity. You can stand there unprotected, fiddle around in the soil. You're okay. You look at Hiroshima or Nagasaki, because when the weapon actually goes off, a lot of that potentially dangerous material is ripped apart completely at the subatomic level. However, with a nuclear plant, that's not what you have. When a nuclear plant melts down, you don't have criticality. You don't have an atomic explosion. What you have is nuclear material that sits there and gets hot and burns off steam and causes maybe hydrogen explosions. Reactor 4 appears to have suffered that fate at Fukushima. And then you have a continuous release of potentially even more dangerous material at a larger level for a significant period of time. At Fukushima, if they were to stop pumping seawater into the ruined reactors there, this material would eventually heat up the dwindling water level. It would begin to steam, hydrogen gas would be produced, it would ignite, blow the facade right off of these buildings, number one. Number two, as it continues to drop, radioactive steam would begin to be emitted, parts of the wreckage would ignite, causing a fire, and that would burn off radioactivity as well. And so at Fukushima, what you've got, not to be alarmist here, because there are people who think the whole Pacific is totally fucked, which isn't exactly the case. Not to be alarmist here, but unless you continuously maintain this site for, the coming decades at least, yeah, you have more release of radioactivity. We have some sort of event that's happened recently in the north of, I believe it's Norway and Russia, that might have something to do with an old nuclear sub, actually, that they had to straddle off in the waters. They had to torpedo it and strand it there without apparently proper storage techniques at the time, or it may have something to do with some sort of testing of weapons or something like that. And even then, we're not even sure exactly what's going on. We have these iodine releases that point to a fairly recent event. This is a short-lived isotope that's being detected at abnormal levels. It has to do with some sort of nuclear event. What that nuclear event is, we're not sure. We don't even know the answer. And then we get to the idea of spent nuclear fuel. You run this fuel through in a nuclear plant and use it for energy. Now, in the old days, we took that spent material and processed it into hydrogen bombs. We're not doing that anymore, though. We're just putting it in salt mines or into a storage pool or something like that. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. You're amalgamating enormous quantities of highly radioactive material in areas that, again, in an unstable situation or as the result of espionage by a foreign state or terrorist activity, could be taken and used to make dirty bombs at the very least, or could be taken by a state to process into fully operational nuclear weapons. This is a possibility, and it's not a possibility that you get with coal mining, or with oil extraction, or with natural gas or solar panels. It simply has nothing to do with the situation. So what I would say for nuclear power overall is I have no problem with using nuclear power, but we need additional safeguards at the very least. We are setting ourselves up long-term in a true disaster, a world-wide disaster of some sort, a massive solar event, Carrington Event 2.0, a large asteroid strike, a nuclear war, something like that, which will, in time, something along those lines will happen. The next New Madrid fault pop-off or something like that. We're in deep shit. You're going to have multiple nuclear meltdowns, even with the new storage techniques that have been employed. Because the plant could be completely ripped apart. You think that your safe storage technique doesn't mean much if the plant is totally undermined. And if you do get a nuclear release, it becomes difficult. We're seeing this at Fukushima. You can't even get inside to remove and properly store this material. You have to seal it in a sarcophagus or build some fucking ice wall around it to keep it from poisoning all the local water supplies. Therein lies the problem. I'm not saying that fossil fuel doesn't have problems. Of course it does. I'm not saying there aren't similar efficiency problems with solar and wind, which are often touted as the best thing since sliced bread. Of course that exists. But all things equal, it would make more sense to use nuclear power in the short term and hope that the efficiency of things like solar rise, that we can, you think that the current state of solar energy is the end all be all of that technology? It never has been and it never will be. Some new design will be developed that probably ends up cutting out some of those minerals you need altogether. And when that's accomplished, it'll be a no-brainer to use it. It'll also be a no-brainer to literally switch over to electric cars and things like that. Right now, we're not at that level. Yes, keep using nuclear. I have no problem with that. But be aware that every once in a while, you're going to have a meltdown. You're going to have a nuclear disaster. And people living near nuclear plants, and not in my backyard crowd, certainly doesn't want to. For everyone else, you are making a conscious decision to live near something that is potentially dangerous, could kill you at some point. Yes, it can be beneficial to the world, but then it leaves all of this spent material in its wake. It potentially does melt down. It is possible, even with the newer design. Yeah, a meltdown is possible. There are people who seem to think that the technology is so advanced, oh, it could never happen. Well, it happened not that many years ago at Fukushima. It's not like we have to look back to the rusted out underbelly of the Soviet Union with its lack of proper nuclear controls to find a nuclear meltdown. It'd be wonderful if that were the past. It'd be wonderful if we had progressed to such a level that there was no such risk in the new world, but that's simply not the case. Then you have the nuclear fuel. You have the fact that you're still using old style mining to get the material in the first place to turn into nuclear energy. You're using oil to power those giant dump trucks. You're using oil to power those drills and those bulldozers and so forth. You're using fossil fuel to do that. You're transporting this material often across the ocean using oil or sometimes gas or something like that. You're transporting at great distances. And then you process it again, and you probably use electricity that was produced by oil or gas to do so. That's essentially what happens. I do believe in green energy. It'd be a better world if that was all we were using. Right now, we're not at that level yet. But to claim that we've hit some sort of hard wall on the efficiency of solar and wind and similar technologies is blatantly wrong. It's completely and utterly false. Within 20 or 30 years, you will come to understand that, and we probably won't be having this debate at that time. Some of these technologies, solar is relatively new in the world, and yet it's made massive advances to the point at which now it's actually commercially successful on some basis. Back in the 70s, no, it wasn't going to be commercially successful. Oh, I'm going to slap this extremely primitive solar panel on my roof so I can power this one light bulb. It only cost me $5,000 and will break in a couple of years. That's what solar used to be like. It's not like that anymore. You can 3D print solar cells now. You can develop windows, fully transparent, that will generate energy. That is a major advancement in this technology. I am generally a proponent of solar, but I admit it's not there yet. It's still not cost efficient enough to appeal certainly to like the working class, barely to the middle class. It's the pet project of people who can afford a McMansion and academia, but it's still a good idea, warrants further testing. And at the very least, if your solar panels fail, it doesn't wipe out everything within a 2 or 3 mile radius like what happens with a nuclear reactor, because that is what has happened in this world before. Nuclear is interesting. There are other reactor designs. People ramble about thorium all day that could be safer than the current methods that are used. But there are still problems that attend nuclear technology. And in effect, all of those nuclear plants are a doomsday machine. If you get an actual nuclear war, every single one of those plants in time will melt down, vastly multiplying the amount of nuclear material that's been released. It would be a second wave of disaster on an already genetically crippled population, largely. It could cause mankind to go extinct. The radiation level could rise high enough to actually cause that to happen, along with wiping out virtually all other advanced animals off the face of the earth. That's about all. Peace out.